the outline I'm going to be using because I didn't have access to print it out. And then here is my PowerPoint, my audience. If you want to look at that quote, it says 301,012 refugees have resettled in America in the past 5 years alone, from the Refugees and Mission Report of 2019. So in addition to the onslaught of refugees, there has been also an influx of immigrant population and others who are venturing to America to seek a better life for themselves and their families. With this new melting pot of people, there are new ideals, new cultures, and new ways of doing things, which are all pros. However, there's one very big con, and that is language barriers. People who do not speak any English or very little English at all are coined with the term limited proficiency English speakers, or LEPs. And having a language barrier can create many bumps in the road to getting things that these people are searching for. So think about being able to get around a new place not speaking the language, being able to find work, and most importantly, being able to have access to healthcare. So this is a very important topic. It may affect a loved one or a friend that you have in the future, and it's also a very big ethical issue right now with the political climate and the politicians' views on immigration and refugee resettlement. So to understand the concept of language barriers in healthcare and the consequences, we can look at what these barriers are, the consequences of these barriers, and the strategies to overcoming them. And that's what we're looking at this page. So, health literacy is essential to navigating care, and barriers often play the biggest role in medical errors and patient dissatisfaction. It promotes mutual understanding and decision-making between patients, and increasingly affect practice, as I said before. So, like I said in the beginning of my speech, there's an influx of new people, and when there's new people in a new place, they often tend to group together. So, in Harrisonburg, Virginia, where I go to school, there's a very large population of Arabic people and African people because Harrisonburg is considered a refugee resettlement community. And then also ethnicities such as Hispanic, Latino, or Muslims often group together. So when these people group together, it may be easier on the hospital system or harder on the hospital system. It makes it easier because the hospital system is able to be prepared for what languages they need translators for, but it also makes it very hard because often the communities that these people are settling in don't have a healthcare system equipped for the mass influx of people. So you can have translators for certain languages, but if you only have one translator for 500 patients, it's not going to do that much. I saw this firsthand when I was doing my women's health clinical in Centara RMH Hospital. So my patient was an Arabic woman, and she was coming in for routine natural birth. She was all set to go, and then shortly after she went into labor, the doctors realized that the baby was in the breech position. So if you don't know what the breech position is, it means that the baby's butt is at the birth canal versus the baby's head, and it's a big medical emergency, and she had to get a C-section immediately. So it was unfortunate because they did not have a translator for her, so she went into the operating room, had no idea what was going on. She was very scared, and I'll never forget the look of horror on her face when she was literally being cut open and her baby was being ripped out of her, and she had no idea what was going on. And unfortunately, the doctor in this situation was not caring at all, and he really just didn't care. So, So throughout my other clinical times, I realized that there is a huge lack of translators. So in the hospital that I was working at, which had this woman in it, they have one translator per language for the entire hospital. So this isn't one translator per floor, it's one translator per the entire hospital. So if someone just got admitted into the emergency department that's dying and they need a translator, the translator has to run from the other side of the hospital and back and forth and back and forth. So it's a very big problem, and it often leads to big issues. So now that we understand what barriers are faced, we can now talk about the effects of these barriers. So if you like to look at this quote, it says, "Much evidence shows how language barriers impact patient outcomes and healthcare delivery. Patients with limited English proficiency have longer lengths of stay than English-speaking patients, even if they have higher socioeconomic statuses. They also have a higher risk of 30-day readmission by as much as 25%. So the biggest and most obvious effect of language barriers in the patient population is poor healthcare outcomes. This can be because of a multitude of reasons. Maybe it's because providers have internal biases against people who don't speak English, or maybe it's because they were not able to gather the correct information when the patient came in because they didn't have a translator. So I just read you that quote. So a study was conducted with these LEP Latina mothers, and it came up with 5 themes. So mothers experienced frustration with healthcare and reported suboptimal accommodations for language barriers. So this study was done with the Hispanic-speaking mothers' children. So it wasn't towards them. So the mothers concluded that they had a preference for bilingual providers, that they felt a negative bias towards interpreted encounters. They felt that they were just getting by with limited help. They had a fear of being a burden, and they felt a stigma around not speaking English and discrimination. In addition to this study, I found a study within a refugee resettlement camp, and this study was actually very interesting because it was from the perspective of the doctors, pharmacists, and nurses versus the actual patients. So this study concluded 4 overarching themes, which were issues balancing autonomy and support. So basically the refugees felt that they would either be completely by themselves or they would be complete with support, and there was no in between. The doctors felt that the educational needs of the refugees far outweigh the resources. So because of the influx of the refugee population, they just don't have the educational support that they need. So they're basically just stuck in this continuing cycle of just not being able to get help, but not being able to do anything about it. The providers felt that there were major trust issues between the patients and the providers. And when you think about it, how could there not be? Because you're just kind of going in blind with no idea what's going on. So, like, let's say you're about to go get a shot and your doctor can't just say, oh, this is gonna hurt. So they're just stabbed with something sharp and then they have no idea. So every single time it's just this recurring theme of like, and the kids in Haiti like that are like that too. They come in and they see like a white person and they just scream because they think they're gonna be given a shot or something, which is pretty sad. And then also the providers felt that there were a lot of diversity issues because they can't really control who's being brought into these refugee camps. There's people from all different places and they don't have enough translators. So it can be seen with these 2 studies that I just read that language barriers not only cause physical effects with malpractice, but they also affect people emotionally, which is also a huge deal. So they create feelings of inadequacy, distrust, and discrimination, and these often also lead to poor health outcomes. And because people who don't speak English don't want to come to the clinic or come to the hospitals because they feel this way, they're not seeking healthcare, and then it's creating more problems in the end. So, now that the bases are covered with the barriers that these patients face, we can understand strategies for overcoming these barriers. So, to effectively treat and overcome these barriers, you have to have comprehension of the topic at hand, which you all now do because you just listened to my speech. So, another big part of comprehending the topic is to have empathy. not just sympathy, because you need to put yourself in the shoes of these people who are coming into America to have a better life, who don't have access to healthcare in their home countries, and understand that it's very frightening for them, and you would not want to be in that position. We often take for granted the access that we have for medical care. Most of us who have insurance are able to just go to the doctor and be able to communicate effectively and be able to get everything done you need to feel better, but these people don't. And just like in any healthcare setting, priority of the patient is key. So if the patient is not being prioritized, then there's no point in really even providing care for them. So now that you have all the information that you need to effectively discern everything regarding language barriers, you need to recognize the barriers faced, understand the effects of these barriers, and remember strategies to overcoming these barriers. So you will be able to spot these issues very easily and understand how you can help and how you can make people feel more included and recognize that one life is not more important than another life. Do you guys have any questions? Anyone?
Yeah, I'm thinking, my brain's trying to think.
Put some thoughts together. I do. In the hospital that I've done at, they have a telephone translator.
Yeah.
Did you guys not have that?
Yeah, so we had telephone translators, but most of the time they would call and no one would answer, which is pretty bad. And another thing that happens is if they don't have translators, they'll have family members who speak very limited English translate, which is almost worse than having no translator at all, because you're having this like broken back and forth, not completely understanding anything that's going on, and then it kind of just makes things worse. So I know a lot of places have like even the things on wheels that roam around with the face, the iPad, but I don't know why in this hospital at this time they didn't have it. Anyone else?
The question just came over my head. Just give me a moment. Oh, so is it a specialty for someone to become a medical translator, or people that are looking to become translators, can they just become a translator but then need to study specifically for the medical field? Like, how does that work?
I'm not actually sure how one becomes a translator. I think that, well, I know that at JMU they have a medical Spanish minor, so if you're not natural born speaking that language, then you could take that and then translate. But I think for a lot of translators, they just know the medical terminology innately and they're able to translate. I know that in a lot of places where there's shortages, nurses who speak Spanish or any other language are a big asset. However, you can't be pulling nurses from from their own patient's room to another room to another room to another room. So that's actually a good question. I'll look into it. You know. Anyone else? You good?